Welcome to this final video update from the UN climate change negotiations in Poland. This is brought to you by Fitzpatrick Woods Consulting and Industry Edge. The negotiations are pretty much concluded, the final discussions being held, so let's wrap it up. First, there's a significant issue emerging between developed and developing countries. There are two classes of developing countries. There are the least developed countries who may never develop and who are responsible for a tiny proportion of the world's emissions, and in some cases none at all. And then there are countries like China, India, Brazil, to some extent our new neighbour Indonesia. Well, they're responsible for significantly more emissions, and as they develop, they'll be responsible for even more. So to what extent are they responsible for taking action and making commitments to significant long-term emissions reduction cuts in the form of targets? Well, of course, those countries say they're not responsible for that at all. The simple reality is that this issue has to be resolved, and it's going to have to be resolved relatively quickly. Of course, coupled to this issue is the issue of finance. There's no doubt that the very least developed countries do not have the financial capacity, and perhaps never will have, to take their part in reducing emissions. But that just is not the case for the somewhat developed and increasingly developing countries, China and co. The reality is that they have the funds now for some of the activities that are required. In future, they'll have significantly more funds. Coupled to the financial issue is the issue of technology transfer. Most of the low emissions technologies in heavy industries that can make a significant global impact on emissions reductions are held in developed countries. Taking the pulp and paper sector as an example in respect of technology transfer, the majority of the best available technologies operate in China. But China's made it clear at this meeting that technology transfer is a one-way street from developed countries to developing countries. So where they have a competitive advantage with a piece of technology that would be lower emissions, they intend to hang on to it. It's all of this that we think helps people to understand why it is that it's almost impossible at this point in time to have any confidence setting a mid-term emissions reduction target that's very strong. Will there be a new climate deal by the end of 2009 to take effect from 2012? Well, we think that there will be, but we think the prospects are that it will be a lousy deal where the developed and developing countries are widely spread from one another. Despite forests and forestry activities representing probably the largest opportunity to take reasonably cheap, scientifically already understood and effective means to reduce emissions, but what Australia can include in its carbon pollution reduction scheme as an asset in the form of, for example, the carbon stored in harvested wood products is going to be dependent on outcomes at an international level. On behalf of Fitzpatrick Woods Consulting and Industry Edge, we appreciate you taking the time to watch these video updates, download the written updates. We hope that these have been useful to you, and we look forward to talking to you in the near future.